right, so hello everyone. Welcome to our UU Virtual Roundtable. My name is Sarah Reyes and I will be today's moderator. Let me just accept some people real quick. So today we're going to have Minerva and she'll be talking about the pros and cons that come from social media usage, which is a really interesting topic for me personally, since I'm studying that in my internships right now. Not related, but just thought I'd mention it. And so before we start with that, just a couple of things to remember. We are going to be recording this session and uploading it onto the UUCLC YouTube page. So if you want to look back on it, or you know someone that missed it, you can just send them the link and it will be there. Secondly, so we're going to be having a presentation first. And Minerva will be presenting it for about 30 minutes. So during this period, please keep yourself muted just for the duration, and afterwards we will have a Q&A session where you'll be able to ask questions or make any comments. And with that, that's about it. So you can take over now, Minerva.
Okay, my name is Minerva Bauman, and I work at New Mexico State University. I'm the media relations officer for the university. My background is in media, newspapers, magazines, and television broadcasting. And I've been in PR now for about 16 years. And I was in the news media for about 16 years as well prior to that. So I've learned over time, the media is constantly changing. And over the last 15 years is really when social media has really just expanded by leaps and bounds. So I'm going to start sharing my screen with a presentation. And let me see if that will work. Now, here we go. Okay, share. Let's see if that's sharing. Okay, is that sharing? All right, let's see here. And slideshow. And okay, let's see. Start. Okay, can you all see now? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, great. So we're talking about the echo chamber of social media and how influential social media is. And so most of us grew up on mass media, TV, radio, newspapers, and our decisions, our beliefs and values are based on what we know as facts, what we assume are facts and our own experience. And most of us have put our trust over the years in the mass media as an authority to give us news. I personally believed in Walter Cronkite and believed everything that he said. And certainly newspapers like the New York Times, newspapers of record. I mean, I even loved Paul Harvey, God bless him, and now you know the rest of the story. And so over the past 20 years, all those media outlets that we trusted in have really been supplanted by social media as a more trusted source of information. And it's a wonder why. Well, mass media on steroids is what social media is, because you've got all of the, well, these are some of the basic things that are the most popular right now. Facebook, as you all know, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, all these various different kinds. And there's many, many, many more nowadays. But mass media uses persuasion. It can persuade public opinion, and it can shape public opinion based on its objectives, because it has this access to a very wide audience. But social media not only has that wide reach, but also the impact of a kind of intimacy in which close ties and family recommendations carry an actual stronger influence to persuade. So you're not just talking about the people that we thought of as influencers like Walter Cronkite and people who were trusted sources of news, but we couple that with our family, with our friends, with those intimate ties, and it makes it a much, much stronger uh, influence. Now, of course, these days, much of it is about buying. They're selling to us, they're selling us. And according to one source, this is Media Bistro, is talking about social media. 74% of people rely on social media to influence their purchasing positions or decisions. 81% influenced by their friends' posts. So if somebody else says they like it, people are more likely that they're going to buy it too. And 47% say that Facebook is their biggest influence. Um, I'm kind of an anti-Facebook person because I've come to the conclusion that some of these advertisers on Facebook are phony, and they just advertise something that they maybe picked up a picture for something somewhere, but that nothing arrives. I have a funny story I'll just add in where I was ordering like a piece of furniture that I saw on Facebook, and it never came and it never came. And I was writing to the folks who were selling it via email. And, I didn't get a response. So I started using the Google Translate, to translate my questions into Chinese. And I sent those over to, and finally, at long last, I got a response from the seller, and they said, "I'm sorry, the boat sank that had your," and I said to myself, at least they did me the courtesy of trying to come up with a funny story to make me feel better about it. So I was entertained by that. I thought that was funny. But so a lot of us, we think about our friends, we think about these platforms influencing our decisions. Now, you started with that first list, right? Facebook, all the regulars that we've seen so long. Well, it's expanded quite a bit more, as you can see from this graphic. There are so many more, and it continues to increase exponentially. Now, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about influence and how these various platforms use us, cater to us, and influence our opinions. So I'm going to see if I can do this. No, I think I'm going to have to get out of this. Hold on, stop share. I'm going to have to stop sharing this, and I'm going to have to share this instead. Hold on, let me see. Da, 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 da. Sorry about that. But you'll have to bear with me here. I have not, whoops, hello. All right, let's get out of this. And that's, I need to do this. Nope. So, okay, there's this. And now I need to share screen, and I need to decide to share this guy. Share. All right. All right, now we're sharing him. And here we go. So we will share Eli Pariser from a TED Talk talking about filter bubbles.
A journalist was asking him a question about the news feed. And the journalist was asking him, why is this so important? And Zuckerberg said, A squirrel dying in your front yard may be more relevant to your interests right now than people dying in Africa. And I want to talk about what a web based on that idea of relevance might look like. So when I was growing up in a really rural area in Maine, the internet meant something very different to me. It meant a connection to the world. It meant something that would connect us all together. And I was sure that it was going to be great for democracy and for our society. But there's this kind of shift in how information is flowing online. And it's invisible. And if we don't pay attention to it, it could be a real problem. I first noticed this in a place I spend a lot of time, my Facebook page. I'm progressive politically, big surprise, but I've always gone out of my way to meet conservatives. I like hearing what they're thinking about. I like seeing what they link to. I like learning a thing or two. And so I was kind of surprised when I noticed one day that the conservatives had disappeared from my Facebook feed. And what it turned out was going on was that Facebook was looking at which links I clicked on. And it was noticing that actually I was clicking more on my liberal friends' links than on my conservative friends' links. And without consulting me about it, it had edited them out. They disappeared. The only place that's doing this kind of invisible algorithmic editing of the web. Google's doing it too. If I search for something and you search for something, even right now at the very same time, we may get very different search results. Even if you're logged out, one engineer told me, there are 57 signals that Google looks at. Everything from what kind of computer you're on, to what kind of browser you're using, to where you're located, that it uses to personally tailor your query results. Think about it for a second. There is no standard Google anymore. And the funny thing about this is that it's hard to see. You can't see how different your search results are from anyone else's. But a couple of weeks ago, I asked a bunch of friends to Google Egypt and to send me screenshots of what they got. So here's my friend Scott's screenshot. And here's my friend Daniel's screenshot. When you put them side by side, you don't even have to read the links to see how different these two pages are. But when you do read the links, it's really quite remarkable. Didn't get anything about the protests in Egypt at all in his first page of Google results. Scott's results were full of them. And this was the big story of the day at that time. That's how different these results are becoming. So it's not just Google and Facebook either. This is something that's sweeping the web. There are a whole host of companies that are doing this kind of personalization. Yahoo News, the biggest news site on the internet, is now personalized. Different people get different things. Huffington Post, the Washington Post, New York Times, all flirting with personalization in various ways. And where this moves us very quickly toward a world in which the internet is showing us what it thinks we want to see, but not necessarily what we need. As Eric Schmidt said, it'll be very hard for people to watch or consume something that has not been tailored for them. So I do take all of these algorithms, you get what I call a filter bubble. And your filter bubble is kind of your own personal, unique universe of information that you live in online. And what's in your filter bubble depends on who you are, and it depends on what you do. But the thing is that you don't decide what gets in. And more importantly, you don't actually see what gets edited out. So one of the problems with the filter bubble was discovered by some researchers at Netflix. And they were looking at the Netflix queues, and they noticed something kind of funny that a lot of us probably have noticed, which is there's some movies that just sort of zip right up and out to our houses. They enter the queue, they just zip right out. So Iron Man zips right out, right? And Waiting for Superman can wait for a really long time. What they discovered was that in our Netflix queues, there's kind of this epic struggle going on between our future aspirational selves and our more impulsive present selves. We all want to be someone who has watched Rashomon. But right now, we want to watch Ace Ventura for the 4th time. So the best editing gives us a bit of both. It gives us a little bit of Justin Bieber and a little bit of Afghanistan. It gives us some information vegetables. It gives us some information dessert. And the challenge with these kind of algorithmic filters, these personalized filters, is that because they're mainly looking at what you click on first, it can throw off that balance. And instead of a balanced information diet, you can end up surrounded by information junk food. So what this suggests is actually that we may have the story about the internet wrong. In a broadcast society, this is how the founding mythology goes, right? In a broadcast society, there were these gatekeepers, the editors, and they controlled the flows of information. And along came the internet, and it swept them out of the way, and it allowed all of us to connect together, and it was awesome. But that's not actually what's happening right now. What we're seeing is more of a passing of the torch from human gatekeepers to algorithmic ones. And the thing is that the algorithms don't yet have the kind of embedded ethics that the editors did. So if algorithms are going to curate the world for us, if they're going to decide what we get to see and what we don't get to see, then we need to make sure that they're not just keyed to relevance. We need to make sure that they also show us things that are uncomfortable or challenging or important. This is what TED does, right? Other points of view. And the thing is, we've actually kind of been here before as a society. In 1915, it's not like newspapers were sweating a lot about their civic responsibilities. Then people kind of noticed that they were doing something really important. That in fact, you couldn't have a functioning democracy if citizens didn't get a good flow of information. That the newspapers were critical because they were acting as the filter, and that journalistic ethics developed. It wasn't perfect, but it got us through the last century. And so now we're kind of back in 1915 on the web. And we need the new gatekeepers to encode that kind of responsibility into the code that they're writing. I know there are a lot of people here from Facebook and from Google, Larry and Sergey, who, people who have helped build the web as it is, and I'm grateful for that. But we really need you to make sure that these algorithms have encoded in them a sense of the public life, a sense of civic responsibility. We need you to make sure that they're transparent enough that we can see what the rules are that determine what gets through our filters. And we need you to give us some control so that we can decide what gets through and what doesn't. Because I think we really need the internet to be that thing that we all dreamed of it being. We need it to connect us all together. We need it to introduce us to new ideas and new people and different perspectives. And it's not going to do that if it leaves us all isolated in a web of one. Thank you.
Okay, so that tells you a little bit about where we are in terms of the evolution of these various high-tech companies and social media companies and how they are trying to deliver what we want to hear back to us. He's calling it a filter bubble. Other people call it an echo chamber. So what's new? Well, we've had a whole lot of fake news lately. And, who knows what's fake and what's not fake? It's there's a lot of misinformation out on the internet and on social media platforms. They talked about ethics, and he talked about the gatekeepers. And the thing about fake news is there's no controls. No journalistic ethics, no editors, no filters, no verification, no accountability at all. Very easily hit the share button on social media and it can go viral. And what we find is that there are a large percentage of people who cite Facebook as their main source of news and are more likely to believe that fake news is accurate. So the reason is that social media amplifies the impact because it recirculates misleading information. So you've heard it so many times that you begin to believe it. So how do we challenge that aspect? How do we challenge it? How do we get past that? Well, we've got some ideas here from Adam Greenwood, and we're going to share that screen with you in a moment. Let me do share screen again to, nope, this guy. And share, and yeah, all righty. Let's start with this.
Is anybody able to hear it?
No, I'm not.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Can you not hear?
No, it's not on.
Can you?
The audio's not on.
Let me see here.
Try pressing the share screen button.
Okay.
And see if the audio is enabled.
Okay, let me share screen. Okay, hold on. Let me stop it and then share it again. Share screen. Okay, there it is. I can see it now. That's what we need. I'll just restart it again. And we'll go back there. Can you hear it now?
We can hear it now.
I woke up on the morning of the 24th of June, 2016, and I couldn't believe my ears. Every single one of my social media connections and every one of my news streams was very, very confident that we were going to vote to remain. So how did I and they get it so wrong? Don't worry, this is not a talk about Brexit. This is a talk about the echo chamber, what it is, and where it could take us in the future. The echo chamber is an environment much like a social media network where an individual's thoughts, beliefs, and opinions are echoed back toward them, and opposing thoughts and beliefs and opinions are never seen, so you don't get the option to see them or hear them. And whether you believe in it or whether you like it or not, the echo chamber is there. So think about all your social media feeds. Big data algorithms are deciding on what content you should see based on your likes, your dislikes, your browsing history, your purchasing history, and the likes and dislikes of your friends, followers, and connections. And this is not that new a thing. We've often decided on which newspaper we want to read or which news channel that we want to see. But we've had the opportunity to see those different newspapers or different channels. But now, 68% of Americans use social media as their sole source of news. So now, more than ever, the echo chamber is more dangerous. But it's not just the algorithms that are doing it. We ourselves are perpetuating it. Every time that we post to social media, a lot of us don't post for ourselves, we post for them. We post content that we want to see liked or shared or commented on. And we do that because we want validation, and that's not a new thing. Human beings have often wanted validation. It's number 3 on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? After physiological and safety comes love and belonging. And every time that we get that virtual pat on the back, we get a little release of the chemical dopamine, which feels good. So if it feels good, then maybe we should do it more, right? Well, maybe not, because if we just continue to create content and upload content that is not for us, but for them, all we're doing is perpetuating other people's echo chambers. But I'm just as guilty of this as anybody else. And when I was going through this process of writing this talk, I was starting to think, well, how do I want you, the audience, to feel about me as I deliver this? And I wanted you to think that I was articulate and intelligent, but I had to take a step back from that because TED is about ideas worth spreading. It's nothing to do with how you might feel about me. And I believe this idea is something that we should all listen to. So it was really good, and it was an interesting process for me to move away from that too. So let's get off of our screens and start getting into the real world. Now, the echo chamber is not just in our social media, it's not just in our news feeds, it's on our streaming video platforms, it's on our dating websites. Imagine millions of people every day getting connected by algorithms. And that makes sense, right? Because you wouldn't want to be connected to somebody that you're not going to get on with. So let's take the echo chamber away from our screens into the real world. A few years ago, 2014, Google created the Google Glass. It was a pair of glasses that you could wear, and it had what's called a mixed reality layer, so you could see data as well as the real world. So you could be walking down the street and you might be able to see directions as you walked. It wasn't a massive success. Expectations were very high, and people had a lot of concerns about privacy. But just 4 or 5 years later, things have changed. A lot of us are using our phones as augmented reality windows to look at data into the real world. There are 12 different manufacturers of smart glasses on the market today. Google themselves have applied for a patent for Google contact lenses. And Forrester says that by 2025, there'll be 14 million Americans wearing smart glasses every day. So let's imagine that we're all wearing these smart glasses right now. And as I look out onto you in the audience, I can see your social media statuses, or I could have sentiment analysis plugged in, and maybe by looking at your expressions, I can understand what you're thinking and feeling. Or maybe I could create a filter so that when you look at me through your glasses, you see bunny ears or big bright blue eyes. So now let's imagine that we are in a supermarket, and as you walk down the aisles, maybe you start to see certain products with a haze or a glow or a halo around them. And these could be products that you've bought before. They could be products that are part of a recipe that you've been looking at, or they could just simply be products that a supermarket is trying to sell to you. I mean, this must sound familiar because this is happening every day on our screens. Now let's take it a bit further, and let's imagine that we're in a coffee shop, and as you look around, certain people have got a glow around them or a halo around them. And those big data algorithms that control our social media and professional networking feeds are deciding who that we're going to get on with, and so they're starting to highlight them. Again, this is happening right now on social media. Let's take it a bit further. Those same big data algorithms that control those feeds decide that there are certain people in that coffee shop that you're not going to get on with, so they completely block them from your view. Let's just think about that for a moment. If you would, I'd just like you to turn and look at the person that you came with today. Now, this person could be your friend, colleague, your husband, your girlfriend, your child. Imagine a data algorithm had decided that the two of you wouldn't get along, and so you never even met. So what's wrong with this? Well, Most people would say that it's good to spend time with people that you're going to get on with. You don't want to spend time with people that you don't get on with. But if we don't debate and if we don't challenge and listen to other people's perspective, then how can we ever empathize? And how can we take on a different way of thinking and be inclusive of people's perspective? Throughout history, we've seen people that have become better versions of themselves because they've spent time looking and listening at a different perspective or a different way of doing things. Where would Bjorn Borg have been without John McEnroe? Where would Garry Kasparov have been without IBM's Deep Blue? When that world champion of chess was beaten by a computer program, he went away and he looked and he analyzed the way that program had played chess so that he could come back an even better player. And we see this in corporations as well. Back in the 80s with IBM and Microsoft, constantly leapfrogging each other to try to become the best, to try to create the best possible products. And now we see it with Apple and with Samsung. And what happens when you have corporations that have absolutely no competition? Well, then you get Blockbuster. If this technology had existed 50 years ago, then maybe Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak wouldn't have met and created Apple. One of them was a Buddhist and one of them was an atheist. If this technology hadn't existed 100 years ago, then maybe Winston Churchill, who famously changed his political ideologies and his parties twice before he was elected in 1940, well, maybe he wouldn't have had the foresight to be able to help the Allies win the war. Just imagine for a moment a world where everybody in it shared your opinion, where every single belief and opinion that you have was the same as everybody else. Well, then maybe every day when you wake up, it would be like the 24th of June, 2016. We've seen it recently, we've seen it in America where Republicans are actually voting with their feet and they're moving to areas where there are more Republicans. And what you get there then is you get homogenized communities with extreme views. So the echo chamber is out there and it is dangerous, but there is something that we can do, all of us, but we have to act now. We have to seek out different types of content across social media. Those algorithms are only showing us what they think we want to see, so we can show them something different. Go out and meet different types of people. Next time that you create something on social media or upload something to social media, let's do it for us and not for them. Sort your social media feeds by most recent rather than most popular, so we're not all just perpetuating the same content round and round. Pick up a different newspaper, pick up The Sun, The Times, The Guardian, The Mail. You might not agree with it, but millions of people do, and it's so important to get their perspective. Keep your eyes and your ears open, because one day you could meet somebody or hear an idea that could change your life forever. Thank you.
Muted, Minerva.
You're muted.
Unmute. Okay, am I unmuted now? Let's see.
Yes.
Okay, good. So, interesting how we look at these different ideas of challenging this social media echo chamber. A couple of professors at NMSU, I think about 5 years ago, well, no, it was right after the 2016 election, so it must have been maybe 2017 or 18. They did a study in which they took 300 students and they did surveys on them to decide or figure out what their attitudes about things were. And then they divided them up into 3 groups. And the first group had access to internet where their attitudes and things that they were interested in were fed back to them, just like these algorithms that these people have talked to. The second group had some things that were fed back to them, right? So they had content that was fed back to them of the kind that they were interested in, but it also gave them an option to choose other content if they wanted to. They had that option. The third group had nothing fed to them at all. It was just open. They could choose whatever they wanted to choose. And what the professors found was that past is prologue. Basically, they found that the people who wanted to see a certain thing, who had options to look at other points of view, other opinions, didn't bother. They still would prefer to look at what attracted them in the first place, and they wouldn't go outside that bubble. So I guess part of it with the social media algorithms and data mining that they're doing feeds back to us what we expect to see, and it does that, but it basically just accelerates a behavior that we already have. So, there are some benefits and alternatives. You have opportunities, of course, to meet people, common interests, make friends all over the world. It's good for business, as we've seen. You have access to all these markets. You can make a lot of money through the internet. Government's participation in social media might result, if it's used properly, in improved communication and citizen participation, more transparency in government, transfer of best practices among different agencies. So these are benefits. Risks. Well, invasion of privacy. There's no controls on that. Identity theft, we've seen that. Cyberbullying, child predators, political polarization, which we have ample proof. And something that psychologists call social displacement, which is less face-to-face interaction. People they spend so much time on their screens that they don't spend less time in face-to-face interactions, human interactions. Of course, right now we're in a pandemic, so we're all on our screens. Options to maybe get control of this in some way would be legislation, Federal Trade Commission regulations. Companies like Facebook, Twitter have had no limits on what they can do. They've been allowed to police themselves, and the result has been they don't, for the most part. Recently, very recently, in the most recent election, Facebook has started tagging things. Twitter has started tagging statements as being untrue or whatever, but this is all very recent. Prior to that, they haven't really, their position has been, we're a platform. And whatever anybody puts on it, the platform that we have is their business. We don't have anything to do with it. So, but they're making a lot of money off of it. So I think at some point there's already some legislation in Congress that's starting to make its way out with regard to social media companies. Perhaps the Communications Commission might put some regulations on them. FCC has regulations on broadcast communication, and perhaps some of these internet communication tools, these channels, might fall under those as well. And quite possibly hold them to similar standards as newspapers and other media outlets with regard to slander and libel and these other things that they have to be worried about when they publish something that is untrue. So these are options that might come up. Pardon my two dogs, they're a little boisterous at the moment. Hush, puppy. Hush, papa. Okay. So alternatives. Choosing your platforms. You know, it helps to know what you want to use it for when you pick a platform and understand the business model that they are using to make money. Most of them use data mining about you, which they sell to others, and ads, which pop up on your screen, right? So you see those and you understand what they're doing. I frankly don't understand this whole data mining thing. You know, what exactly are they selling about me? That's very disturbing as far as I'm concerned. You know, these gentlemen that you heard their TED Talks talked about algorithms. There are some alternative social media platforms that don't use ads, don't have data mining, and have no algorithms. And here are a few alternatives to Facebook, Diaspora. It's user-owned and nonprofit. Veto, it's a subscription service, which is an alternative to Facebook. MeWe, the way they get money is that they give a basic service for free, and then they upsell for special services that make it more engaging. Gab is an alternative to Twitter, and that was originally established by crowdfunding. BitChute, it takes donations. It's like YouTube. It's a YouTube alternative. And Ello relies on upselling optional features to enhance their experience. It's an alternative to Instagram and Pinterest. So there are so many and more coming all the time. So I don't think, well, just get off of there. So I don't think there's going to be any end to the options. There's new ones that keep coming up all the time. And so you could re-update this probably in a week or two, and you'd have a lot of new options out there. So we're just going to have to keep vigilant. Stay vigilant. Know what you want to do. Know what these people are using as far as their business models are concerned, and what you're willing to allow when you get on these various platforms. So I'm open for discussion.
So, okay, anybody want to ask Minerva some questions or some comments?
Let me start with one having to do with not specifically these kind of media, but I have gotten to the point that I do not watch CNN very often because the name CNN is Cable News Network, but they seem to have more opinion than they do news on there. That I would assume has government regulations like newspapers, but I don't know. Do you have a feeling for
I do.
regulation of CNN?
Well, it's not just CNN, it's virtually across the board. Gosh, back in the Bush administration, the FCC started releasing a lot of the, I wouldn't say controls, but a lot of the regulations that governed broadcast entities, like the Fairness Doctrine, gone. Ownership of different news media outlets. That's why we've had sort of conglomerates of one ownership over a number. And so what you do is you reduce the voice. So you don't have a bunch of different voices. But as far as cable news is concerned, it's just been the absolute, and all of them, the networks, not just CNN, you know, MSNBC, Fox, all of them. They're not required to label what they do as entertainment or opinion or anything anymore. You know, all of these things, the regulations through the Federal Communications Commission used to have rules that these folks had to follow. cable news networks are just a free-for-all. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the movie Network. It was
Yeah.
an old movie from the 70s
I've
about,
seen it. Yeah.
yeah, TV going haywire. I mean, they had soothsayers, they had, all kinds of crazy. And the lead actor on that said, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." Because he was an old newsman and he was just tired of all the selling and the glitz and it was all sensationalism, right? Just to feed people's appetites. And that's what's happened to cable news. We don't have the Walter Cronkites anymore. We do have news networks. And granted, they are less sensationalized, the three networks, ABC and NBC and CBS. You have your 60 Minutes and you have some of your staples that have been around for a long time. But the cable news, which is what a lot of people watch because it's not limited by time. I mean, it's always on. So whenever somebody wants to pop into it, somebody can. But they're entertainment programs, opinion programs. They're not news programs, and they're not required to identify themselves as that anymore because of the FCC regulations that basically just went out the window during the Bush administration. So sadly, that's the truth. And I think we do need a lot more regulations. And I think they should, just like having a PG-13 identifier on a movie, we should have for entertainment purposes only on some of these shows so that, going in, okay, this is just a joke. It's like the Daily Show or these late night comedy guys who talk about news. From as far as I'm concerned, that's just as much an entertainment, some of these other programs, as these late night comedians talking about the news.
Is there any way that the social media could go through the same evolution as newspapers did back in the early 1800s? I mean, I think that's what's got to happen because so many people are on social media that it's just unbelievable. And so unless there's I think it has to be a combination of both regulation and social media regulating themselves. There's got to be a come together. It can't just be government. It can't just be somehow something's got to happen. The newspapers have an opinion page and then they try, it's not that it's perfect, but it's better than social media.
Yes.
Right, exactly. And you're absolutely right. And it's going to have to be a combination, but you've seen recently on the Hill them calling Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, on the carpet up in front of Congress. And they've done the same thing with the fellow who's the head of Twitter. And they've called them on the carpet and a little tiny bit
Not much.
response, a little tiny bit of responsiveness of sort of labeling certain things as untrue on Twitter and on Facebook, but it's very, very little. They don't want to be responsible for
but
content.
Also it's a moneymaker.
Yes, the more people post, the better it is for them, and the more incendiary and very what you call it, spicy it is, the more it gets people all agitated, the better it is for them because more people want to watch it and more clicks, it's clickbait, right? So that's where they are. But I think there's going to have to be a combination of the legislation that disincentivizes them from making money. And the other thing I think too, with this invasion of privacy, this data mining and selling, I mean, that all sort of blew up with Cambridge Analytica and how Facebook had sold all this personal information to Cambridge Analytica that then went on and used it for political purposes. But, we have a right to our data. And granted, Facebook probably has a 400-page, agreement that people click on without even reading it, right, before they go. And, for all we know, they're entitled to our firstborn and, everything that happens to us, every thought that comes out of our head for the next 50 years. Who knows what we're signing away? But with Facebook, these folks really need to be obligated to pay people for their information. I think if there is legislation that says, look, if you're going to aggregate and data mine people's personal information and then sell it to other entities, it's like residuals for TV shows, you know? I think every person whose data gets sold should get kickbacks for that. So if they sell it, they're going to have to give every person money for the data that they sold. See, the only way you can impact these folks to change is through money.
That's
It
right.
can only, it's only going to be through somehow cutting back their revenue sources, their revenue streams, so that they think better of doing whatever they're doing if it's going to cut into their revenue.
Like you, I don't go on Facebook, and I know a number of my friends that aren't either. They're just cutting it off because of it just, but I know a lot of people do. I mean, it's a social network between families, and I understand that. Right? But I just got to say something in regard to television. I see these ads about people, ready to get Social Security or Medicare, that sort of thing. And they imply that this is done by Medicare. It isn't. It's just them trying to sell a supplementary insurance. And the implication is that it's Medicare, and it's just terrible.
It is horrible. And I'll tell you what, guess what they're allowed to do? They're allowed to put a disclaimer at the bottom of the screen that's about an 8-point type or something. No one is ever going to be able to read that. But as long as they stick it on the screen, they have then protected themselves from liability. And it's, there's so many loopholes and
I know.
sidestepping that people do to get around doing the right thing.
Anybody else have a comment or question?
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, people think they can use a software program for free, which Facebook or Twitter, for some reason is a free program. You don't pay for it. And then you're all surprised that a company that constantly updates this program, also for free, and has computers hanging out that stores your information and sends it on, whatever you put out there 24 hours a day, theoretically, to your friends worldwide. It costs electricity to keep up these, banks of computers. They have employees, they have to pay taxes for these employees, payroll taxes. What the hell? That has to be paid. So that money has to come from something. So of course it comes from advertising, and it comes from selling, that information you put on there, your name, your birthday, where the hell you live, that kind of stuff. Where else should it come from if you do not want to pay to use the service in the first place? I mean, I'm in business. I don't give my services away for free. Duh. It's like anybody else that works for a living expects to be paid on a monthly basis at least. Why does everybody think they can just get shit for free?
Well, Facebook does have advertising, and people do see that, and they do have that for people who use that product. But there are those who would argue against data mining, and data mining is more than just your name and your birthday or whatever. Data mining is about your likes, your dislikes, what you think of, your political affiliations, your friends and family, who they are, many things about your habits and you personally. So it's a lot more than just directory information that they're selling. And the algorithms that feed you things that you have already looked at. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would have on an advertising the same pair of pants that I already bought advertised to me.
All of us have had that.
again, right?
I
Because
know.
it's an algorithm. It's not something with intelligence. It's an algorithm. So you
You know,
bought
but
that.
I mean, that happens. Yeah, that happens to you anywhere. You know, it's
But yeah, my
but-
personal opinion about all of this is that yes, you're absolutely right. We're using a service. They advertise us to us. You know,
Right.
that's kind of how television works. That's how radio works. They have advertising, and that's how they make sales. But I'm fundamentally against selling my personal information about me, about my family, about my relationships, anything like that, to third parties who may or may not, you know, other countries. I mean, you know, who knows who they're selling this information to and how that information is being used. And so that should fall under privacy laws and regulations, because, you know, your television station can't get that from you. When your ratings company like Nielsen, they get very little of your private information that they're allowed to use when they do that ratings data. So why shouldn't these companies fall under similar regulations that also limit these other companies as well?
Anyone else have a comment or question?
Is anyone familiar with the program Hacking the Mind?
I'm not.
No, I'm not
Minerva,
either.
are you familiar?
No, I'm not.
with what?
This is a documentary that's been out in recent months. I think it was on PBS maybe and TED, but it's exactly what we're talking about. Jennifer told us about it. I have not seen it myself, but everything you do electronically is recorded somewhere and it's collated, and your entire profile is well known or can be found. And it's, according to Jennifer, it's an ingenious expose on all of this. So maybe Paul, sometime in the future, if Jennifer will tell us how to access it, we'll see Hacking the Mind.
Yeah, very good
Yeah.
point.
I
Jane?
have an ad blocker on my computer, so I don't get all of those ads. And they still let me use the service for free. I'm quite fond of Facebook, use it frequently. But I admit that I was stunned by the results of the election because I don't know those people. Not many anyway. I do know some, but I believed the polls. I believed what my friends were telling me, that I was sure that we were going to have a blue wave, and it just did not develop. And I admit that it's because I select my friends. I select who I'm friends with on Facebook. I select the organizations that I belong to and the news that they give me. And I love it, but it was a big surprise to me. And I recognize now that I did it to myself, and I need to make some changes in who I'm talking with. And, I talked with some of my neighbors who I knew would vote for Donald Trump, even not just other Republicans, but would vote for Donald Trump. And, we just decided to accept that we would not talk about the election. And so even with them, I was not getting, the full picture. And so, you're absolutely right that I'm happy if somebody wants to feed me these links. I don't generally go to links unless a friend is telling me to go to a link.
Jane, you had a comment?
Well, I would say for one thing, this has been an excellent presentation. And it is very interesting how media does influence you. And Jan was thinking there would be a blue wave. I take all the, as well as taking the liberal news media, you know, newsletters from liberal organizations, et cetera. I take all the conservative too, and read both. And I really felt that the Democrats would be lucky to win the election based on what I was seeing on both sides. So, you know, it is interesting. It really does have an impact.
I just like, sometimes I'll just like be away from my phone.
All right. So it's about 3 p.m. Do we have any more questions
Yeah,
or
just
comments?
one more comment. PBS NewsHour, when they present a topic, they almost always have both sides viewed.
Yes.
Yeah, they do a good job. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about next week's topic. Eileen and Kelly Brook are going to talk about post-election analysis. That should be very interesting. I see they had an editorial in the Sun News today talking about, you know, what went on in the election. So I'm sure they'll do a fabulous job. That's Ellen Van Wee and Kelly Brook. I'm sure, Jane, you know them very well.
Yeah, I do.
And so they'll do a pretty good job. And then also, folks, if you have any ideas about people doing roundtable, I have 2 or 3 for December, but it's a constant battle to find, you know, speakers that are relevant. So
Paul, you've done a great job every week.
yeah,
Yes.
any ideas you want to send to me, my email is paulco@nmsu.edu. So please do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Minerva.
Thank
One
you,
last-
everyone.
Uh,
Thank you, Minerva.
Minerva,
Have a great
thank you. Thank you very much.